What is up, LobotomizeGang? Welcome to the Halloween special. It's the guy. You know, the guy who never watches horror movies because he gets scared easily and he doesn't have any friends to watch them with. Disclaimer, you can call this video Sweet Baby Ink because it spoils every piece of media it touches. More specifically, it spoils the endings of Far Cry 3, Breaking Bad, Inglourious Basterds, Better Call Saul, Misery, Nightcrawler, Your Assistants, The Dark Knight, No Country for Old Men, The Terminator, etc. So if you haven't watched or played any of the aforementioned movies or video games, then I suggest you take some time to consider that fact, then continue to watch the entirety of this video. The game Far Cry 3 begins with your character Jason and his friend group going on a vacation, only for the ordeal to be turned upside down when you're captured by Vas Montenegro, a ruthless pirate and human trafficker who acts like he's simultaneously high on weed and cocaine. Now right off the bat, the game establishes Vas as the villain, albeit a pretty generic one. If the fact that he had kidnapped and is planning to ransom you isn't indicative of that, it is certainly made clear when he shoots your brother in the neck, then does the cliche bad guy thing of letting you run through the woods instead of killing you. Well, in his defense, Vas underestimated Jason because he thought Jason was just another spoiled rich kid with wealthy parents and not the main protagonist of the game Far Cry 3. Vas is a very in-your-face villain that chews up every scene that he's in. His presence is felt whenever he's featured in the game, sometimes even when he's not. The point of me telling you all of this is that based on his actions and behaviors, Vas can be categorized into the first of the three types of villains featured in this video. These villains range from violently unstable to apathetically ruthless to potentially hypothetical. But however different they are, the one thing that they share is their ability to terrify us, which is what we're going to explore. And if you're wondering where Jack Doherty fits into all of this, then I can assure you that he ranks up there with the baddest of them all. And I'm not talking about, damn girl, you a baddie. I'm talking, But in order for you to make sense of all of this, we must embark on a journey and dive into the darkest and depraved minds of media's most terrifying villains. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the term villain means a man of ignoble ideas or instincts, an unprincipled or depraved scoundrel, a man naturally disposed to base or criminal actions, or deeply involved in commission of disgraceful crimes. So basically half the population of New York City. Putting aside the concepts of morality and good and evil, we as humans should naturally hate villains, right? Or at least treat them with utmost disdain. After all, they go against everything that is considered acceptable by society. Arson, murder, theft, robbery, fraud, slavery, debauchery, as well as every illegal or immoral thing your mind can conjure up. You name it, a villain out there has done it. Yet, paradoxically, we absolutely love villains, no matter how terrifying or morally dubious they are. I mean, just look at some of the most prominent heroes in pop media, then think about how their villains are remembered. Luke Skywalker has Darth Vader, Harry Potter has Voldemort, the Hacker has Shodan, Shell has GLaDOS, Spider-Man has his comic book writers. Without his amazing rogue gallery consisting of the Joker, Bane, the Penguin, the Riddler, etc., Batman is just a rich psychopath looking for an excuse to punch people instead of going to therapy. Heck, dare I say that many people love these villains more than the good guys themselves, though hopefully more in movies and video games than in real life. How a serial killer like Jeffrey Dahmer has an actual fan base is beyond me. I mean, the guy literally homicided somebody's entire being, yet there is a surprising number of people out there downright obsessing over him.
He's a 5, but he murders people.
He's a 10.
You're going up to a 10.
A 10.
If that is not a sign that humanity is at its lowest, then I don't know what is. But I digress. What I'm trying to say here is that we are absolutely fascinated by villains, no matter how disgusting they are or how terrified we are of them. And nothing says terrifying more than an insane sociopathic maniac getting all up in your face while yelling about respect. Okay, let's play a
Can I just say that the Primal is a stupid name?
What do you mean? It sounds cool.
As cool as calling your character Fire.
Shut up.
or Ash with an E.
Okay, let's play a small game. I'm going to name a few bad guys. You guys are going to listen and see what they have in common, okay? Vas Montenegro from Far Cry 3, Tuco Salamanca from Breaking Bad, Tommy DeVito from Goodfellas, Tony Montana from Scarface. Well, if you say that they're all short, violent fellas with little regards for anybody else's safety, including their own, who are ready to explode and beat somebody to death at a moment's notice, then you would be right. Now that you mention it, I can't help but to notice their height. I wonder, is there a correlation between one's lack of height and shortness of temper? I mean, I am 5'6" and I'm not always angry. Just depressed. Anyway, the primal villains, named so for their tendency to revert back to the primal instinct of survival, self-preservation above all else, to hunt, to kill, and to dominate. These people tend to escalate already tense situations to burst out in anger at the slightest hint of provocation. Whenever they appear somewhere, a child becomes a potential orphan elsewhere. If you've been anywhere near TV or the internet in the past 4 decades, then you will have undoubtedly come across and been terrified by many villains of this type. Though not as popular and as interesting as the second type of villain in this video, the primal villains are everywhere in video games and movies. And it's easy to see why. Not only does their presence threaten our well-being on a superficial level, they are even more terrifying on a subconscious level. Take a look at Walter and Jesse's reactions in this scene in Breaking Bad when Tuco Salamanca is stomping that guy's head in. And all he did was say something that Tuco didn't like. Granted, Tuco was on enough meth to wrestle a kangaroo and win, but it doesn't take away from the fact that he's a violent sociopath who murdered his henchmen for next to no reason. At this point, our main protagonists have concluded their deal with Tuco. They have sold the product and have received their payment. So why didn't they run away when shit hit the fan? They could have at least taken cover behind the numerous cars lying around the scrapyard, or just move a few steps away from the maniac turning a guy's face into burger patties with his bare hands. Instead, Walter and Jesse just stand there, dumbfounded, looking like they've just seen your mom naked. Well, the answer is pretty simple. They felt fear. So much fear that they were frozen. They were scared stiff. Now what Walter and Jesse are feeling is not your regular everyday run-of-the-mill kind of fear. This is true fear. This is primal fear. According to scientists, the Earth, the planet that we live on, has been around for about 4.5 billion years. And when you think about it, I mean really think about it, it is almost unfathomable just how long ago that was. It is so insane that scientists actually came up with a term for this. It is fucking bonkers. To put things into perspective, the first pyramid was built nearly 4,700 years ago. Humans have only been on Earth for around 200,000 years. Well, modern humans anyway. The Homo group, including our species, the Homo sapien, has only been around for more than 2 million years, give or take. But that's besides the point. Compared to the 4.5 billion years, our existence is but a blip, a fraction of a second in the history of the Earth. Look at me! Look at me! Look! See? There! That is the entire history of mankind summarized. With all that being said, let us consider the fact that humans have been the dominant species since forever. This is largely thanks to our fight or flight response. In the presence of something mentally or physically terrifying, the pituitary and adrenal glands in the human body, like volcanoes, erupt, spewing forth hormones and chemicals. These trigger the release of epinephrine, flooding our blood with cortisol, which supercharges the body, heightening our senses, boosting energy levels, preparing the body to deal with the danger at hand. Thousands of years of evolution, survival of the fittest, made manifest in a split of a second. This takes us back to Walter and Jesse, who are essentially frozen because their fight or flight response is operating on all cylinders. Tuco poses a threat so immense and induces terror so primal that he makes Walter and Jesse's fight or flight response go into overdrive, involuntarily freezing up their bodies. They didn't run not because they didn't want to, it's because their brain decided that Tuco was such a dominant specimen and they so submissive and breathable that it was more advisable to just freeze up, shut down, and take it up the ass until the danger passes. Now, all of that was just a roundabout way of saying that primal villains are terrifying because they activate our fight or flight response. Yep, that's it. What do you expect from a channel called LobotomizeGang? These villains are scary because they pose a direct physical threat to us. This is not to say that they don't pose a psychological threat, however. Any more philosophical rambling from Vast and I might actually go insane. Look, if I wanted to listen to some insane crackhead yap about life choices, I'd just go to Chicago. This brings me to the next point, which is the scariest thing about these villains, something that they share with all other villains we're going to discuss. It is the fact that they aren't trapped in the confines of media and video games. Everything that makes them terrifying, their short temper, unpredictability, affinity for violence, and total disregard for everybody else's safety as well as their own, these traits are also present in the people you meet in your daily life. Honestly, how many times have you seen a gym bro with enough drugs in his body to open a pharmacy go berserk on a minimum wage worker when he doesn't get what he wants? Hell, just go to YouTube or TikTok and you can find an endless supply of people like these, throwing tantrums, hurling verbal insults, going so far as to throw hands with the people around them. These sociopaths are everywhere. And you know what's even scarier? Whereas psychopaths are born, sociopaths are made. People who grow up in an abusive household, children born into a life of crime, offspring of lawbreakers who regularly teach their children to break the law, a kid with neglectful parents who let them watch one too many violent movies, or an unhinged YouTuber who is subjected to obscurity because he has too few subscribers. So if you don't want something bad to happen to you, then I suggest subscribing and turning on notifications. Thank you. All of these situations can lead to the creation of dangerous homicidal sociopaths. Granted, this is not always the case because your brain needs to be messed up enough for this to happen. But it doesn't take away from the fact that whether you like it or not, there's a vast Montenegro or Tuco Salamanca in the making out there somewhere in the real world. That is, if there isn't already one living somewhere in your general vicinity. Think about it for a second, okay? Ask yourself, have you ever been near somebody whose presence alone is enough to generate a sense of dread that puts you on edge and make you feel unsafe? Chances are you have at least once. Well, unless you are the danger, in which case, please stop. Get some help. But if you're not, it would be wise to listen to your survival instinct, evolved specifically to be triggered by these people, who could very well be sociopaths just lurking around the corner waiting to reenact the live version of Inside Out with you being the main character. These people are so dangerous it is unambiguous, almost transparent as to whether or not they want to hurt the people around them, something which can't be said for the second type of villain, who in contrast harm you in ways so subtle that you might not even realize that you're in danger, most often until it's too late. And just for clarification, okay? The distinction between the first and the second type of villain is not that the first are sociopaths and the second are psychopaths. I would like you to look at it like this. Similar to me, these villains are on a spectrum, with the Primal being batshit crazy and the Husk being batshit crazy, but in a more subtle way. This is why, when we really break it down, you might find it surprising just how much the second type of villain affects you in your daily life. So let's break it down. Compared to the primal villain's tendency to follow their instincts, the Husk seems to be the complete opposite. They are cold, calculating, and methodical. They are hollow. These villains also display a distinct lack of empathy and disregard for other people's well-being. A prominent example is Colonel Hans Landa from Inglourious Basterds, one of my favorite movie villains of all time. He's a linguistic genius whose charisma and magnetic personality mask his utter lack of humanity. What sets him apart from villains like Vast or Trevor from GTA 5 is that Landa does not let himself be driven by emotions, which is precisely what makes him so much more terrifying. Well, he did have an outburst at the very end of the movie where he strangles that actress to death, but that's because he considers her a traitor to the Reich and thus to his very existence and everything he stands for. But the rest of the time, Hans Lanner conducts himself with mechanical efficiency, operating like a well-oiled German engine, built for the sole purpose of Jewish annihilation. See, contrary to the Primal's propensity to forgo self-control and succumb to rage, the Husk takes a step back and approaches the situation with cold indifference. Though that is not to say that they won't resort to violence when things go sideways.
I just want to point out that these names sound way too cartoonish. The Primal? I mean, are we analyzing murderous psychopaths or catching Pokemons here?
You're gonna catch some hands if you don't shut up.
See, this guy belongs in the fourth type of villain, the underdeveloped.
See, that's where you're wrong. There are only 3 types of villains. I've arbitrarily decided.
The mentally underdeveloped.
Whatever, shut up. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I can't help but to admire Lalo Salamanca. Not because he's a ruthless murderer, but chiefly because of his beguiling charisma, which he uses to disarm people and gets them to lower their guard. Also, his ability to detach himself from any emotional connection and resort to violence at the flip of a switch is also very cool. For the entirety of Better Call Saul, not once do we ever see Lalo talk to people without a smile on his face, and a genuine one at that. It goes to say something when a psychopath who doesn't feel human emotions can smile without it looking forced or practiced. Just compare him to Lou from Nightcrawler and you can see the night and day difference, though I think it is a deliberate choice in Nightcrawler. This is why it's so scary whenever we see Lalo go from your cool uncle to your abusive stepdad in a fraction of a second. This scene at Lalo's compound where he introduces Nacho to his family is a prime example of this. The way Lalo talks makes us feel like these people are his family, whom he cares about and has a genuine connection with. But as we all know, in truth, he treats these people how abortion clinics treat baby fetuses. Made clear by the fact that he doesn't even bat an eye when using this guy as a human shield, as if he meant nothing to him. We can only imagine how long he had known these people at the compound, how many interactions he had had with them, how many stories they had shared. All of that suddenly erased from Lalo's mind. Or even worse, could have never even registered. As cool and as badass as Gus Fring is, Lalo Salamanca is the highlight of Better Call Saul. Beside Walter White, Lalo is the only one who is remotely on the same level as Gus Fring, going so far as to almost defeating him. This is possible because of the relentless, almost superhuman drive to achieve his goal at any cost, a trait which many of the Husk villains share. You know what? It does sound stupid.
Huh?
Okay, how about this? How about I just call them type A, B, C villains, okay? You're happy now?
Happier than you'll ever be in this lifetime.
All the villains in Type B are willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done, no matter how evil it may be. This is not because that they aren't aware of the morality of their actions. They just simply don't give a damn. What they aren't aware of, however, is the feelings of the people around them and any consequences their actions might have on these people. This utter lack of humanity is a prominent trait these Type B villains exhibit. You know what's a terrifying example of this? Look at Annie Wilkes from Misery. Ooh boy, that is one scary lady. If you thought Lalo was crazy, then I suggest you give Misery a watch after finishing the entirety of this video. Without going into too much detail, the movie revolves around Annie keeping our main character, Paul, in captivity and forcing him to write a book that essentially undoes the death of a character, which happens in Paul's latest novel. Coincidentally, this is what I imagine is happening at Marvel's headquarters at the moment. Naturally, as a normal human being of sound mind, Paul was rightfully opposed to this and made multiple attempts to escape, all of which predictably thwarted by Annie. This culminates into one of the most fucked up and nightmarish scenes in cinema, where as justification for a greater good she herself made up, Annie absolutely pulverizes Paul's leg with a sledgehammer in order to prevent him from further trying to escape. Now, does Annie know that this is wrong? Well, the fact that she kills the local sheriff, then plans to commit a murder-suicide with Paul is a good indication that she's at least vaguely aware that her actions are illegal. But I can tell you for a fact that she doesn't feel the slightest hint of guilt because she's an apathetic psychopath. The only reason Paul was able to survive was that he convinced Annie to keep him alive just long enough to finish the book, which, as we have established, had been Annie's goal from the beginning, a goal that she's willing to go to any lengths to achieve, made evident by her decision to spare Paul, even if it meant putting herself at risk of having Paul as a witness to her murder. Whether intentional or not, Paul had taken advantage of Annie's ambition. He didn't appeal to her conscience. He offered to become a tool. Now at this point, I hope that you have a general idea of the type B villain, their lack of empathy, their total disregard for other human beings, and their drive to achieve success that makes them so scary. But there's one thing that holds Landa, Lalo, and Annie back from being the very best. The one thing that bars them from the top spot on the fear podium. The one thing that makes them scary instead of pants shitting. The one thing that bars them from the top spot of the fear podium. The one thing that makes them scary instead of pants shittingly so. They lost. This leads us to, in my opinion, the very best portrayal of the type B villain in cinema. Lou Bloom from Nightcrawler. Lou exhibits every single characteristic that we've previously discussed in the video, but the one advantage that Lou has over other villains is his ability to manipulate people into doing his bidding, essentially shielding him from all repercussions. By the way, I find it interesting that they call him Bloom, which is the word that you would use to describe a beautiful flower, considering that every single action that he takes in the movie can be considered ugly. Well, I guess there could be a deeper meaning behind it, as throughout the course of Nightcrawler, we sort of watch Lou bloom from a psychotic criminal selling scrap for money to a psychotic criminal selling snuff videos for money. Amy Dunne from the movie Gone Girl is also a master manipulator. Not on the same league as Lou due to her violent and sloppy methods, but a master nonetheless. Throughout the entirety of Nightcrawler's runtime, not only we, the viewers, are captivated by Lou's meticulously engineered speeches, designed for the purpose of worming his way into people's lives as he did Nina and Rick's, in order to manipulate them into getting what he wants. It is also the characters in the movie who are equally as captivated by him, which is a feat in and of itself when you take into account his gaunt, almost skeletal-like appearance. Now if you have watched Nightcrawler and ever wondered why Lou is so creepy and off-putting to look at, then I'd like to direct your attention to his huge bug-like eyes and the fact that he doesn't blink ever. You know who else doesn't blink? Elizabeth Holmes.
People don't even know that they have a basic human right.
This woman runs a company that wants to take your blood. I don't know about you, but she looks like she drinks blood instead of testing it. You know who else is creepy? Mark Zuckerberg.
People's private information and how... Okay, how about you just chug the water? We'd like you to make a little smile just to show that you can. Oh, good heavens, that's just horrible. To stop that, son.
These are just two unblinking examples of psychopaths. But why not blink, you ask? Well, it is because they lack empathy. They don't understand emotions like normal humans do. Emotions including fear, guilt, discomfort, or embarrassment. This makes prolonged eye contact a walk in the park since they aren't aware of other people's discomfort, or they couldn't care less even if they do. Just look at Kenneth Copeland, a literal demon from the warp wearing the skin of a human. Look at this footage and count the number of times that he blinks.
You said that you don't like to fly commercial because you don't want to get into a tube with a bunch of demons. Do you really believe that human beings are demons?
No, I do not. And don't you ever say I did. We wrestle not with flesh and blood, but principalities and powers.
This is ironic since the man is a televangelist who preaches the word of God to the masses.
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ indeed. Like, couldn't you have chosen someone, I don't know, that doesn't look like he feasts on the flesh of the innocents?
How absolutely stunning. Just delicious. It's so good.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see this guy leading the armies of Korn in the apocalypse. Not to be a downer, but you should really be concerned, especially when Type B villains can be found thriving in corporate environments, and many of them hold high positions in companies like Microsoft, Apple, or YouTube, who is making it very difficult for small YouTubers to succeed, which is why I'd like to thank all of my patrons for making this video possible. Look! I have 4 now! 4! Special shout out to Oceaneris in the lobotomized tier, Mawa Mangala in the disintegrated tier, and PR in the gone tier. Thank you. Why did I say it with a deep voice like that? The ad-free uncensored version of this video as well as extra content is on the Patreon. Also a link to the Discord. So check it out. Back to the video. The fact that Type B villains as well as psychopaths run rampant in a corporate environment is more than evident when you take a look at the downward trajectory of the gaming industry, which is akin to a guy in a wheelchair tumbling down a slippery slope heading straight toward the nearest landfill. Sure, gamers have to pay $70 for a license of a barely functional husk of a game, a license that can be taken away at any moment without consent, mind you. But fuck the gamers, right? AAA companies can just shit out just about anything and the whales will eat it right up on day one. Financially, the gaming industry is basically money heaven for these Type B villains who have cheated and lied their ways to the top. And since the motto here is making the most money possible while putting in the least amount of effort, these companies have to do only barely enough to keep gamers thinking, hoping that someday our beloved franchises can just miraculously come back from the dead. And if this means employing all of the shady, manipulative tactic, no matter how immoral, all the better, right? Face it, Assassin's Creed is dead. Splinter Cell, Diablo, Deus Ex, Dead Rising, dead and buried in the shallow grave so that they can get wet when the CEOs piss on them. And no, using AI to upscale texture and then reselling the game for $70 doesn't count, okay? What's worse is that crying about it won't help. Because, as we have established, these people are Type B villains and thus lack any human emotion. The gaming industry is just one in the myriad of examples. Commerce, healthcare, media, politics, etc. Wherever there's an opportunity to exploit other human beings, you bet your ass that out there somewhere there's a Type B villain foaming at the mouth to seize it. And worst of all, because they are so subtle, the way they go about ruining our lives, we might not even realize until it's too late. Well, I guess there is one good thing that we can say about these villains is the fact that they don't discriminate. Yeah, whenever they look at us, they don't really see color or race, you know? They just see resources to be used and exploited. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it to turn into a rant on the gaming industry. That's a topic for another video. But I hope that you get my point about the dangers of the Type B villain and their real-life equivalent. At this point, I think it would be wise to do a little recap, okay? So here's a pop quiz for you guys, alright? Look at the spectrum. Type A villains lack control of their emotions, are prone to violent outbursts, and have little regard for anybody else's well-being. Type B villains are composed, scheming, and manipulative. They are devoid of any sympathy and possess supernatural drive to achieve whatever goal they set their mind on. Question 1. Where does Gus Fring from Breaking Bad belong on the spectrum? If you said that he lies anywhere in this general area, then you'll be correct. Question 2. Where does Patrick Bateman from American Psycho belong? Even though we're not sure if he really did anything wrong in that movie, it's a safe bet to put him in this general area. Question 3. Where does Thanos belong? You know what? Don't even bother. He belongs nowhere. Cause get out of my face with that cartoon shit. From Discount Space Adolf in Infinity War to Cobra Commander from G.I. Joe in Endgame. Had Thanos seen the current state of the MCU, he would have snapped himself out of existence. But I digress. Using the spectrum, we can safely categorize all of our favorite villains, right? Well, Not exactly. See, I've saved the best for last. We have the Type C villains. Coincidentally, these are the villains I personally find the most terrifying. Okay, as you might have noticed when I show you the spectrum, the Type C villain can't be placed anywhere there. The reason for which is pretty simple. They are nowhere and everywhere, all the time, at the same time. They might exist or they might not. You decide.
What the heck is this guy on about?
Well, I can guarantee you this, I am on something. If you happen to Google best movie villains or most iconic villains, it is 100% guaranteed, a universal truth, that you will see Anton Chigurh somewhere on that list. Anton Chigurh is the main antagonist in the movie No Country for Old Men, based on Cormac McCarthy's novel of the same name. If you have by any chance read the novel as well as watched the movie, then I wholeheartedly believe that you would agree with me that saying Anton Chigurh is the main antagonist is like blaming the fire for burning your house down instead of the arsonist whose life of crime and delinquent behavior stems from his upbringing in a dangerous, impoverished neighborhood whose formation is a direct result of societal degradation and governmental neglect. Throughout the movie, our main protagonist, Llewellyn Moss, is relentlessly pursued by Anton Chigurh, a ruthless criminal of unknown origins. And I mean really unknown. From the second he makes his appearance until the very last scene of the movie, the one and only thing we know about him is that he is an unstoppable killer. Now, parallel to Llewellyn's plotline, we also have Sheriff Ed, who is essentially playing catch-up with Anton. No matter what he does, Ed always seems to be one step behind, never being able to actually stop any crime, ultimately failing his mission of catching Anton and saving Llewellyn. At the end of the movie, Sheriff Ed retires, saying that he can't keep up with a seemingly new kind of crime and violence unlike anything he had ever faced before. Without diving too deep into this movie, because that deserves another whole-ass feature-length video that's gonna take a month to make, but will most likely get less than 2,000 views, Sheriff Ed failing and not being able to save anybody, hear me out, is the point. Anton Chigurh can't be stopped. And he might never be stopped because he might not even exist in the first place. He is the embodiment of the violence and crime that ultimately prevailed over Sheriff Ed. Even though we follow Llewellyn for most of the movie, in the end, he suffers a sudden, unceremonious, off-screen death in the hand of some random Mexican gangsters, as if he's just one in another million victims of gang violence. Which he is. Try as you might, you can never escape from reality, and violence is reality. This is why Anton Chigurh is the perfect example of the Type C villain. These villains don't threaten us physically or mentally. They terrorize us existentially. They are a force of nature, something we can either succumb to or struggle in vain to withstand. And nothing says force of nature more than the Joker from The Dark Knight. Well, a solid case can be made for him being a Type B villain. After all, he exhibits every single trait of a Type B villain, and he's also a textbook definition of a psychopath. But in my opinion, what sets Joker apart from Type B villains is the fact that he exists in direct correlation to Batman. As cliche as it might sound, without Batman, there wouldn't be a Joker. He is everything that Batman stands against. When you watch The Dark Knight with a critical eye, you will realize that the Joker's plan has the same logic as a Looney Tunes episode. It depends on so many things out of the Joker's control to go exactly the way he planned. Here's a small example, right? So Joker plans to escape by blowing a phone bomb put in this guy's belly, right? In order to do that, he needs a phone, which he eventually takes from this guy. But what if this guy wasn't in the room? What if he decided to stand and watch outside? Didn't the police check this guy before they put him in jail? You're telling me that the guy with a giant Nokia brick shoved in his stomach didn't scream or at least complained? And nobody bothered to check on him when he did? If you really think about it, the Joker shares the same power as Domino in Deadpool 2. The power of lazy writing. Now you can think of the Joker's plan as movie logic, or plot holes, or you might not even think about it at all. But you know what I think? I think that's the point, that no matter what you do, no matter what he does, whatever anybody does, the Joker will always prevail because he can't be stopped. He's a force of nature. He's the embodiment of chaos. And chaos doesn't play by the rules. Chaos doesn't follow any logic. He didn't really lose when you take into account the consequences his actions left on Batman and Gotham as a whole. As far as I'm concerned, the Joker won. He won by dismantling the concept of Batman. By turning Harvey Dent into a bad guy, Batman was forced to kill him. In doing so, breaking the one single rule that Batman bases his entire morality system around, which is not to kill. Batman essentially betrayed himself and all that he stood for. The whole reason Batman wanted to fight crime in the first place was that because he wanted to bring justice and to stop the killing. So, by killing Harvey Dent, Batman fundamentally killed his ideology. He killed his purpose. Batman killed himself. That is how terrifying the Joker is. But do you know what is even more terrifying? Unfortunately, at this point, I have to direct your attention towards the waste of the universe's limited resources, that is Jack Doherty. Here's a question for you to ponder. What do Jack Doherty and the Terminator have in common? Well, at the first glance, the answer is pretty simple. They are as similar as Jack and shit. But just hear me out, okay? The Terminator is a cold, emotionless, unstoppable machine devoid of any humanity. Programmed to kill, it is an instrument of destruction, its only purpose being the termination of human beings and the extinction of mankind. With the ability to time travel to any location at any point in history, a Terminator exists outside the confines of space and time itself. It is the perfect example of a Type C villain. Compared to this, Jack Doherty is just a stain on the seat of humanity's pants, right? But let's break it down. Even though Jack has had a long and controversial existence on the internet, with him downright committing crimes and multiple internet personalities criticizing him for his actions, Jack still has somewhat of a fan base, and he consistently makes thousands of dollars every time he streams. Now, whether these people watch him for his non-existent personality or just waiting for him to mess with somebody who's ready to throw it all away is up to debate. The one thing that is clear is that he has never been stopped, and he won't be stopped. If anything, the negative attention has only drawn more eyes to his gas station toilet of a channel. Well, that was until the recent accident, which led to Jack being permanently banned on Kick. But as we have established, Jack still has a lot of fans, and he's still making money by begging for it on TikTok. Now, at one point in the crash, Jack, who was still filming, panned his camera over to show his injured friend who was bleeding from his head. And instead of seeking help, Jack handed the camera to his friend and told him to continue filming. Gotta get the views, am I right? Not long after that, in this video showing Jack's mom being concerned about him, the only thing that came out of his mouth was that he had 2 other cars. Yeah, just treat your mom like a random crack hoe on the street and flex about the wealth which you gain from being a disgrace to mankind. Huh? That'll show them. Okay, I am not you. I am barely even human. So I can't attest to what you can understand from me telling you all of this. But from what I can tell, Jack Doherty is a cold, emotionless blob of flesh devoid of any humanity. Programmed to make money, he's the instrument of shitty content. His sole purpose, the creation of worthless brain rot and the debasement of mankind. And similar to the Terminator, he was unstoppable right up until a few weeks ago. And even that is not guaranteed. Jack Doherty is a Type C villain in real life. He's the manifestation of greed and the embodiment of everything that's wrong with modern American society. He's a force of nature that will do whatever it takes, even defy death, to squeeze every single view he can from impressionable children. He exists in correlation with the internet. Without the internet and its personalities like Moist Critical, there won't be a Jack Doherty. And thanks to the internet, as long as humanity continues to exist, so will Jack Doherty, forever digitized due to his daily live streams, which record almost every single action that he takes, every decision that he makes, creating a clone of himself that exists for all eternity within the confines of the internet. And please don't tell me that a digital clone has no soul. Jack has no soul, and last I checked, he's still running around committing crimes. But I don't want to end this video on a sad and depressing note, okay? Let's look on the bright side. Jack does still have one redeeming quality. I was kinda exaggerating, just a little bit, when I said that he is similar to the Terminator. He's not really. Yes, Jack has a lot of followers who like to follow him and copy him, and he does a lot of reckless and dangerous things that could potentially lead to his death. But he's still very young and he still has a lot to live for. So, while the Terminator seeks the destruction of mankind, Jack Doherty just makes sure that the dumbest people die first. What's the point of this video? Well, what's the point of anything, really? Is this video an exploration on villains in media and our unhealthy obsession with them? Is it a warning that there are real-life villains even more insidious than those found in media? Is it a commentary on the internet and the negative effect it has on our youth? Or did I just make a 40-minute video just to on Jack Doherty? Well, you decide. You can derive whatever value you want from it. But I hope that you enjoyed the video. I've never done anything like this before. And I gotta say, it turned out great. Even better than I expected. Now that this little side quest is finished, game reviews are back on the menu, baby! So subscribe and stay tuned to witness my gradual descent into insanity. If you don't, when you stare into that dark corner in your room, you might find Elizabeth Holmes staring back.